Jan is a proud grandmother from Southland, determined to use her public status to raise awareness around HIV health and safety in the healthcare industry.
Every needle stick injury should be reported and seen to. Without healthcare workers, there's no healthcare. So the government have got to start looking after the healthcare workers.
When Jan is not publicly raising awareness for Positive Women, she can be found looking after her animals on her lifestyle block in Mataura.
It's just a little 5-acre block and we love it. And it gives us something to do. I didn't want to retire from work and sit and do nothing. Sit. We've got our animals and they're a reason to get up in the morning to go out and feed them, or just go out and watch them, just stand there and watch them. We have goats, got kunis, chooks and 2 border collie dogs. We have alpacas, my babies. I think they're the ones that keep me sane.
Jan has worked as a nurse all her life. She finished her nursing career working as a phlebotomist, which involved taking blood from patients.
A young man that I had been treating for about 4 years, who used to come to me regular for his blood tests, and he was pretty sick. On the day of his blood test, he had been particularly unwell, and I was a little bit concerned about him. I should have paid more attention to what I was doing, and I wasn't. I was more interested in what he was doing. And as I turned away from the sharps container where I was getting rid of my needle, it clipped the edge of the sharps container, tipped up, and the syringe needle penetrated between my thumb and my forefinger. I went to the hospital, had all my baseline blood tests done, and I was put on prophylaxis medication within 2 hours of the needle stick injury. The end of that month, I had another blood test. It was negative. We started to relax a little bit. But then a couple of weeks later, I took the flu. And instead of getting better after about 3 or 4 days, I was steadily getting worse. And my husband said, we have to go to the doctors. And he got me straight into hospital. The following morning, they came and told me I was HIV positive. If people did the right thing and equipped their healthcare workers with the safety equipment, we can put an end to needle stick injuries. But every time I talk about safety in the workforce, I come up with the same thing. There's no money in the budget. We can't afford the safety equipment that's out there.
I'm Graham Mills. I'm an infectious diseases physician, and I'm now up to 21 years of working in the area of HIV. I've walked through the period where we saw large amounts of people dying, to the period now where HIV is a chronic, manageable illness for people who choose to be managed.
A member of Positive Women who wishes to remain anonymous was unaware that her husband was HIV positive.
My partner got diagnosed with HIV when I was 25. I fell pregnant. He felt an urgent need to tell me. Went and got tested and it came back positive. He had been having unprotected sex with men. They didn't realise at that time that being on medication through a pregnancy can highly reduce the chances of transmitting the virus to the baby. I ended up having the termination. And then of course we had to go and get the children tested. One came back negative and one came back positive. Our family's life got turned upside down.
Many people think that if a mother is HIV positive, of course all babies born to that mother will be HIV infected, but that's actually not true. People believe that because they realise how much blood is involved in the whole delivery process, and people realise that blood is a risk factor for HIV, and therefore they assume that the baby would become infected. But with therapy, normally commencing in the 2nd trimester of pregnancy, after sort of 12, 16 weeks, we can reduce the transmission to almost zero.
My doctor at the time said, well, there's no reason you can't have a baby now. And I was sort of like, what? What do you mean?
There have been 85 children born to mothers in New Zealand where their HIV was known about, and not one of those 85 children born to those mothers has been infected in New Zealand.
Marima's dream of having children was about to become a reality when she met her future husband on a trip to Fiji.
He'd lost his wife and 2 children to AIDS, and he was willing to start a new life and have a second chance at a family with me. He's positive and I'm positive, both have HIV. There's quite a lot of different medications in the world. We were both on the same one. So both of us have suppressed virus in our blood. We were able to safely have a child together the natural way. We've had a daughter, and she's 3 years old now, and she's negative. And we had a son last year, and he's negative.
When Jane was first diagnosed, she was initially told she had 3 years to live.
In 1990, when I was first diagnosed, there were no medications, and HIV was a death sentence. I just remember thinking 3 years, and I just thought, gosh, you know, I'm not going to see my son be 10, and I'm not going to see him finish school and see what kind of career or what he's going to do with his life, and I'm not going to meet his wife or his future partner. And those were three things that sort of went through my head. By the mid-90s, medications had advanced dramatically. And from that point onwards, life really changed.
With therapy, that person can live a almost completely normal life expectancy.
At the wedding, I remember her telling us how she didn't even think she'd see, I think, my 6th birthday or something like that. So for her to be at my wedding, it was really powerful. And then for us to have our son, and for her to see her grandson. Like, all these things are very important, but very normal, and I'm just so glad she's been able to see them. But what it has done is it's made me really value her, not take her for granted.
I'm remarried to somebody who is HIV negative. My ex-husband and I, we're still friends, we still support each other. It's quite lonely being HIV positive, and to have somebody who can relate to you and understand what you're going through, you don't throw that away too easily.
Support's number one. I didn't have that for more than a year, and I felt so alone, depressed, and since I got support, everything changed. Everything went uphill from then.
Melinda was recently married to her partner in a traditional Javanese wedding.
I started meds beginning of last year. It's brought a lot of energy back. I'm able to live a normal life now and work and like anyone else, really.
Jan has always been community focused, and in her spare time volunteers for St John's Ambulance.
I actually got to know the people by actually doing a talk about HIV to the St John's people on a training night. So that's how I got to know them. And then I heard through the grapevine that they were looking for volunteers, and went and just said, look, you know, is my status an issue? And they said no. So I started my national diploma with them.
Just because there are now HIV medications and people can live a lot longer, people should not become complacent around HIV.
There's a danger in normalising it. It's not a nice thing being chained to medication and taking it every day.
And what we're seeing more and more nowadays is people not dying from HIV, but actually dying from drug-induced diabetes or heart attacks, which are as a direct result of the medications. It's a lifelong condition. Add to that the stigma and possible discrimination that goes alongside of that. It's not something to be complacent about.
A lot of people say it was really unfair. You don't deserve to be living with this virus because you were doing a job. Then I realised that, you know, they didn't blame me, but they would blame somebody else, you know, who was living with the same virus. It was doing the same damage to their bodies. So that's when I realised there was a lot of stigma around this virus. And stigma is extremely destructive.
Someone said to Mum that HIV positive people that are like me and Tony, we're irresponsible for having children. And that's sort of, to me, I could say that about someone who has diabetes. And so I've said to people before that you may judge it, but I have a right to have a child just as much as you do.
When I was raising my children, I was really afraid that if it got out into the community, we'd be known as the AIDS family. Really didn't think that was going to be good for my children's self-esteem. I want other women to know that it can happen to them, they can become infected. I was in a stable relationship, I thought I was fine. You need to look after yourself, you can't rely on other people to come clean, to tell you their darkest, deepest secrets. Really, you just have to look out for yourself, and you have to get some balls. It was always at the back of my mind to say something, but I was always afraid to.
That's the way that I contracted HIV, by doing the big OE and thinking I was in a stable relationship. It doesn't matter whether you're going to have a one-night stand or you're in a stable relationship, you need to use protection or have a test prior to that.
There's only a handful of us in New Zealand who are public about our HIV status, and we will go on putting our faces out there, and we will go on being the voice for all those people who are too frightened to disclose.
It would just be wonderful if one day it would just be, it's just okay to say that you're HIV positive. You know, I'm going to the hospital because I've got an appointment to see my HIV specialist, and that is accepted.
This program was funded by New Zealand On Air.